Welcome to the second convening of the LBJ Business Policy Forum, Navigating Shifting Global Trade Policy. My name is Mary Davenport, and I'm a Master of Global Policy Studies student in the class of 2026. It's an honor to open tonight's event as someone deeply interested in energy, geopolitics, and technology policy. The LBJ Business Policy Forum is so glad to have students, faculty, staff, policymakers, future policymakers, and business leaders here with us this evening. Tonight's program will begin with remarks from our Dean of the LBJ School, Dr. J.R. DeShazo, followed by a panel discussion on global trade and competitiveness, moderated by one of my professors, Professor Dilawar Syed, who also leads our year-long policy research project on policies for U.S. business competitiveness. Now in his 6th year as dean, DeShazo has expanded the LBJ School's reach, adding new centers, welcoming new faculty, and launching new programs, including the school's first ever undergraduate degree. You can also find him on Instagram taking his signature selfies with students, and hopefully after tonight with me too. Please join me in welcoming the Dean of the LBJ School of Public Affairs, Dr. J.R. DeShazo.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I really appreciate it. So we're in our second event of the LBJ Business Policy Forum. And the inspiration for this series was between Professor Syed and myself. I came to the conversation thinking, we need to support American businesses more than we have. And as I look back on the last 2 decades of federal policy, I didn't feel like either the Democrats or the Republicans had really supported the competitiveness of American industry the way that we needed to, both internationally and domestically. And he had the experience both in the private sector and in government to kind of put together a series of 6 conversations about how to make American businesses more competitive. And for that, I'm very grateful for his leadership. Tonight, we're going to talk about tariffs, and we're going to talk about trade. And I can't think of a policy area that has gone through a more radical transformation in terms of its political identity than tariffs have. For those of you that are older than 40, you will remember the days when Republicans, we might call them Bush or Reagan Republicans today, felt like tariffs prevented American businesses from accessing markets abroad and prevented access in supply chains to the resources that they needed to be successful, right? And so there was a position within that party of being very pro-trade and anti-tariff. And then you had kind of blue-collar Democrats that wanted to protect blue-collar workers in this country. And they viewed tariffs as an opportunity to protect those workers from foreign competition and keep their wages high and demand for those products high. And that was the conversation that we had in this country between the two parties, each trying to advance their best ideas for probably 40 years after the Second World War. And as you're going to hear tonight, that has changed. It has changed radically. And I think what is interesting is the United States is approaching what we in the economics world would call an industrial policy. An industrial policy is a goal of encouraging industrialization. It could be in auto manufacturing, it could be furniture, it could be textiles, it could be any strategic sector that we are interested in advancing. And I remember when I was a graduate student at Oxford and we were studying the countries around the world that succeeded in the 70s, the 60s and 70s, and even early 80s. We would look at countries that had industrialization policies like South Korea and Taiwan and Japan and Malaysia and other countries. And they would take a portfolio of public policy approaches to advance growth in their economies. Tariffs would be one part of that, because their goal was to cultivate a kind of a comparative advantage in one particular industry. But they would add in a focus on the skilled workforce and an educational component. They would add in subsidies for capital for those companies. And they would add in other kinds of public policies that supported that industrial ecosystem. And what's interesting about the conversation today, where we've just passed the CHIPS Act, which is the closest we've come to a formal industrialization policy in probably since the Second World War, honestly, is that we now have a president who is determined to forge an industrialization policy relying primarily on tariffs without those other accompanying policy strategies. And we're in the middle of this experiment. And so tonight's conversation really could not be more timely. I am so grateful for the experience and the experience and the expertise that we're going to have on today's panel. I do now want to move to my next role, which is to introduce Professor Syed. He is an entrepreneur and former U.S. cabinet official whose leadership has spanned public and private sector organizations. Let me tell you very proudly that he is a double major here at the University of Texas, computer science and economics. He tells me that the computer science was like 3 to 4 times harder than the economics major. But those are two very impressive majors, I think we'd all agree. From there, he went on to a decades-long career in Silicon Valley, where he scaled businesses in AI, software, and consumer web. And then he went on to serve in our federal government. He served as Deputy Administrator for the U.S. Small Business Administration and Special Envoy for Commercial Affairs at the State Department, where he helped drive small business recovery post-pandemic with record federal support and coordinated disaster recovery in the aftermath of hurricanes Helen and Milton. And he currently serves on several technology ventures as a board member, and has, much to my delight, has joined the LBJ School as a faculty member and the McCombs School as a faculty member. So, Professor Syed, thank you for your leadership, and the podium is yours.
Thank you so much, JR. One of the best things about working with amazing leaders is that they inspire you to do amazing things. And what we're seeing here tonight with our second edition of the LBJ Business Policy Forum, it's a new tradition. It's a new convening that I hope will outlive us. So thank you for your vision and support and your friendship. And welcome again. It's good to see many of you back here. A few of you joined us. I see a few faces from last time when we inaugurated our first LBJ Business Policy Forum. And as I said then, and I want to repeat today, we want to build this series with community in. Your voice matters, and especially in these very critical policy choices. And so we hope that you show up, continue to show up. Our next forum is on rare earth minerals in a few weeks, and share your perspectives as we chart the course forward. Public policy at its heart is about public interest. It's about upholding the social contract. It's about keeping the American dream that we call it. That's the social contract in this country. We call it as our dream that we ultimately want to achieve within reach. And when JR talked about the political identity changing for trade, one thing is certain, that at the end of the day, people have been at the forefront of this change. During my travels in public service, when I spent time, especially in the Midwest, and had the opportunity to travel Michigan and Ohio and Western Pennsylvania, I saw up close empty out factory floors, plants closed. We saw communities that we knew once were bustling towns with thriving middle class. And I would walk out of those places often feeling underwhelmed, because we knew there were thousands and thousands of stories, untold stories of livelihoods that were lost. So tonight, when we talk about trade, we talk about tariffs, we're going to talk about export controls. We're going to talk about USMCA. We will strive to keep focus on the people, on the US worker who probably lost their livelihood, but along with that, also lost a sense of purpose in society. They also lost perhaps dignity in some respect. We will strive to keep focus on a small business owner that today is receiving tariff duties bills from CBP. And I meet with some of these folks. Somebody I met recently received a bill for $19,000 when she imported ethnic food store ingredients from Central America. And she said, I don't have $19,000. I may have to lay off workers or shut down. These are realities. We're going to talk about families that are starting to feel the pinch of tariffs as a policy. Rising cost of beef, rising cost of vegetables and fruit and apparel and cars, coffee, which will hurt many of us very soon. So trade discussion is not an abstract policy discussion. It's about people. And it's about their livelihoods. So when we talk about US competitiveness in this realm, what we're really talking about is how do we make sure that that US worker who lost his or her livelihood can be set up to succeed in this new world. We're really talking about an entrepreneur, an innovator who can have fair access to global markets so that they could compete and win, and thereby our country can win. So I wanted to make sure that as the Dean talked about the shift of trade policy going from almost a democratic view of what it was considered, now it's a policy tool that's used by a Republican president. But the constant is the people and the impact on the people. In many, many respects, while we are seeing this policy, it's a demonstration that there had to be a response to what automation and globalization caused in terms of impact on these communities and people all across our country, especially in the industrial Midwest. Before I introduce the panelists, I do want to share some data, and I'll start to do that in all of our forums, just to ground ourselves with some key data points. And this is from the Budget Lab at Yale. Currently, the average tariff rate in the United States is 18%. Now, average tariff rate is calculated as total duties the government collects divided by value of imports. For some perspective, average tariff rate in the US at the end of 2024 was 2.4%. So we went from 2.4 to 18%, pretty steep in a matter of 10 months. Let me also add, this is the highest it's ever been since 1934. I can say safely, none of us were around then. And the downstream impact, average household has had to pay $1,800 more year to date, we are not done with the year, in increased pricing of everyday goods that they consume that have been impacted by tariffs. 490,000 payrolls lost, livelihoods, people. 500,000 jobs lost, attributed to 2025 tariffs year to date. GDP growth has gone down by 0.5 percentage point. Now, the United States is the world's largest economy. So when we talk about shaving off 0.5 percentage point on GDP growth, many of you are econ business majors, that's a significant number. And by the way, once you kind of bake that in, that's a perpetual compounding because we are perpetually smaller as an economy. Again, year to date, tariff impact of 2025. So the question is, what do we do about this? One thing that I'm holding myself to, we're not going to just state the problem, because we could spend a lot of time stating problems. We want to be prescriptive, constructive, and of course, nonpartisan in our policy prescription. So the key question that the panelists and I will be discussing tonight with your help is, what's the way forward? How do we make trade policy a driver of US competitiveness, but not a drag on our economy? And that's what brings us here tonight. We're going to talk about what's the way forward for workers and how do we make the United States more competitive when it comes to trade policy. And let me just add here, this work is not just happening at the stage or in this room, it's happening at the LBJ school as we speak. As JR mentioned, I'm teaching my graduate class, and my students are, as we speak, tackling trade policy topic. And they are developing policies, or strategies rather, for big three automakers in Detroit on how they navigate USMCA. How do they consider the potential of reshoring in places like Brownsville? So, Mayor, we're going to have some questions for you from the audience as well. I'm going to actually ask my students to please stand up from LBJ and be acknowledged, if you could, please. So these folks are converting ideas into action. Thank you. Now, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and if you could please, once I finish introductions, take the seat. Don Graves is an old friend. We met at the very start of 2020 presidential campaign, and he's been a friend through the thick and thin of my public service journey. Don served as our Deputy Secretary of the United States Commerce Department. As you know, U.S. Commerce is an agency of agencies. A big part of the agency is International Trade Administration, so you had a front role in managing so much of our bilateral engagement when it comes to our trade market access and so forth. Commerce Department also implements export control, so we'll get a practitioner view from you on that count as well. Mayor John Cowen, he's an extraordinary story, sixth generation Brownsvillian. I have a very cool story about his family, which we'll start off with, so I'm gonna keep that. But what I also find very interesting, and you will find interesting about John's background, is not only he's a mayor, he also runs a custom brokerage firm on the border in Brownsville. So he has a direct front row access right now to what's going on in terms of managing the impact of tariffs. And Joaquín Spamer, who's the founder and CEO of Custom Integrated Logistics, a leader in construction and logistics on both sides of the border, and you've got quite a perspective on USMCA as we speak. So with that, gentlemen, please join the stage, and I'll join you shortly as well. So again, welcome. John, we'll start with you. You are, as I mentioned, sixth generation Brownsvillian. As we were getting to know each other, you shared with me that your third great-grandfather built the first house in Brownsville, and it's still standing.
Correct, that's correct. My third great-grandfather came from England in 1820 aboard a ship that was, unbeknownst to him, purchased by the country of Mexico for their fight against the Spanish in their revolution. So he arrived into Mexico at age 14, ended up in Matamoros, Mexico, which is the sister city of Brownsville, which was not there at the time, and ended up building the first house in Brownsville, Texas.
And it's still standing, and you're a mayor, and he was also a mayor, correct? Right? And you also have a family member who were an Austin mayor as well, so you have a connection.
Correct. I'm named after John Ford, who was the third mayor of the city of Austin, and he was also a mayor of the city of Brownsville. So I have a unique perspective on history, and obviously in Brownsville, my ancestors were going through a very transformative part of our state's history and our city's history, and I think we're currently experiencing a similar transformative effect with the SpaceX being in our backyard, and the center of energy as well with the Rio Grande LNG project, which is the largest energy investment in the United States currently.
So speaking of that transmission, of course, your ancestors experienced that being part of Mexico and Texas as an independent country, and then the being part of the Union. Share with us, given the topic tonight of trade policy, the impact on the border economy. Brownsville is on the border, has done very well being an attraction for investments from manufacturers. What is the impact of tariffs on your community?
I think it has a tremendous impact. We have historically a very high rate of poverty. So there's a lot of people that are just barely getting by. And so when you say prices have gone up on average 18%, that means people are not being able to pay their car bill. They're being squeezed out of their apartment for not paying their rent. And it has a detriment on businesses as well. It's hard to plan, as tariffs can change from one week to the next. So there's not that the ability to really, historically you can plan to scale a business. It's really hard to do that now.
So speaking of business, you are also a business owner. You're an entrepreneur who runs a custom brokerage firm. And so it's a unique vantage point you have. Speaking of tariffs and custom duties, do you want to demystify for our audience, what does it mean, how that changed, how that work changed for you, and what is your team experiencing as we speak?
Right, historically, we've been in basically a free trade environment, right, where most of the imports coming in from Mexico really qualified for USMCA or from NAFTA. Now it's everything's been flipped on its head. Now, before we took maybe 5 to 10 minutes to process an entry. Now it's taking 30 minutes to an hour, even longer, as we have to analyze all the different layers of tariffs that have been applied and making sure that our customers are able to take advantage of the exclusions and all the different methods to reduce their duty impact. It's just, I think it's high-stake environment right now for importers.
And you were not given any advance notice.
Correct. Very
the
little.
other issue is that things are changing rapidly. So even if the team gets trained on this, the new entry, process, you don't have finality on when this is going to be the.
Absolutely. Every couple of weeks, there's new changes, and having to explain that to our clients is a challenge. Even talking with U.S. Customs, they don't know really the full impact of what was passed. So there's a lot of uncertainty on all facets of the.
And John, one thing that just before I bring on others, that I think it's important for us to be able to share with the audience, help us understand how custom duties are paid. You're first front-ending for your customers. So do you mind talking about your cash flow?
Sure. So basically, a custom broker facilitates the importation of goods into the United States on behalf of the importer. Basically, the custom broker has 10 days to pay the duties on behalf of the importer, but from the time of the entry, right? So I give you an example. We have a client that wasn't paying much duties, right? They import maybe 50 shipments a day. Now it's $1 million a week that historically they weren't paying, and I have to advance that to the. I'm acting as a bank, right? I have to pay that to the government and then charge my customer to get refunded, right? So there's this accounting kind of nightmare that's created to track all these payments and making sure that we're made whole. But we also take the risk on, we can pay the government and then our customer might not pay us, or they might go bankrupt, right? So there's a lot of risk involved right now for our business.
And you said that they weren't paying duties, hardly any, and now they're paying $1 million a week.
And that's one client.
That's one client. I'm sure that will prompt some questions, and we'll come to that. But just hold that thought there. Don, you had the privilege to serve the country at a high level. You were also with then Vice President Biden as part of his economic team. This, and as J.R. mentioned in his framing remarks, we've seen this evolution of trade policy going back to the second term of President Obama with the counter-China strategy, and also just make sure that we are getting fair access to markets. Help us understand how we got where we are, because you were also involved with bilateral trade negotiations.
Well, Dilawar, thank you for the question. Thank you for having me here at the LBJ School. It is really great to be back in this part of Texas. I carry a card. I learned this from Joe Biden. I carry a card with me just to always remind myself, like every day I would look at this card before I stuck it in my pocket, and it says on two sides. One is the foundations of a prosperous and equitable world economic order, and the other is part two, how the U.S. is different. And the thing that I think both Democrats and Republicans for generations, as the Dean had mentioned, agreed on the notion that we believed in shared democratic values, that when we promulgated those across the world, it was going to be towards our advantage, that we adhered to the rule of law, both here and internationally, that if we protected worker rights, if we protected intellectual property, and if we promoted that worldwide, it would inure to our benefit. If we allowed our really creative capital markets to work in support of the most innovative people in the world, then this country would flourish. Those were the building blocks, but the three key pieces that I underline at the bottom are transparency, clarity, and predictability. That's what has allowed us to be successful as a country, because it's why investors the world over flock to the US. They knew that this country was going to, it would waver a little bit, and we might modify our social policies here and there, but generally, you could count on the United States. We were going to be transparent and clear about the way that we did it. And so that is the direction that we've been going for generations, basically since the Bretton Woods agreement was signed. And if you don't know the Bretton Woods agreement, you can look it up. I'm not going to spend time talking about that. But over the last decade or so, things have started to change. And you and the Dean both talked about this a little bit. The rest of the world started changing somewhat. Partially, they started catching up to us. We had a big advantage coming out of World War II. They started catching up. Two, they started changing their approach to trade with their partners, their bilateral and multilateral partners. It was a disadvantage to us. Then along came the PRC, the Chinese government. And about a generation ago, they've gone through lots of cycles and great revolutions and all of these sorts of things. About a generation ago, they made a really big change. And they opened up in ways that they hadn't before. And the rest of the world said, biggest market in the world, $1.4 billion, give or take. Now it's maybe less than $1.4 billion, $1.3 billion. It's a great market. Let's flock in. Let's bring all of our companies in and see if we can sell to this big marketplace. Well, President Xi and to some extent his predecessors went about it a different way. They said, well, we're only going to allow you to come in if you do a few different things. If you work with us, if you bring in your intellectual property, if you build your plants here and train our workers. And then they started engaging in intellectual property theft on a grand scale. They engaged in coercive economic policies to force our companies and our trading partners into really difficult trade agreements. And what they've done is they have caught up to everyone. And in fact, they've passed a lot of other countries in terms of their technological development in ways that we never would have imagined a generation ago. Good for them. I mean, that's what every country is trying to look out for their own people. But what it's done is it's put us on our back foot, on our back feet. And we are now fighting a battle across the globe in all of these critically important technologies. They started with sort of the lower end technologies, flooded the market, just said, we have $1.4 billion. We can subsidize all of one sector, and we'll just flood the market with goods that are cheaper than anyone else can produce, and we'll kill off all of the other companies in that industry. And they've done that over and over again, sometimes taking our industries from here and buying them and bringing them over. And so that's created this really unusual position for us as a country where our usual trade approaches haven't worked as well as they should have. And we've, to your point, and I am a Midwesterner, and I've seen this throughout my life, the erosion of the power, economic power of people in my community. I spent a year trying to help bring back the economy of Detroit after the bankruptcy, after the implosion of the Big Three. So I know what's happening across the country. China is playing a different game, and we are in the process, so I'm getting to your question, we are in the process of reinventing how we use the tools that we have to try and counter what China has done. And so part of that is industrializing, having an industrial policy, which the dean talked about. We're not a command economy. I don't want us to be a command economy, but we can't let the PRC or others outcompete us in critical and emerging technologies.
So, and look, I mean, a lot of it is very reactionary, and there's always a limitation to how much reaction can do. I'll just share one quick story. Speaking of your point about how China has taken some of the industries here, and actually, this story is stunning. It was in Financial Times today, and it was in the wake of the rare earth export controls China put in place last week, which prompted President Trump to announce a threat of another 100% tariffs. And the story is that GM in the late 1980s, early 90s, actually had a rare earth magnet factory in Indiana that was bought by a Chinese company, CFIUS, the Committee on Incoming Investment in the United States, cleared that under the Clinton administration. When President Bush got elected, there was no objections. Again, both parties didn't see this, and they let that one magnet builder in the country, in Indiana, be bought by the Chinese with the promise, hear the trick, with the promise that they will keep the factory in Indiana. Both administrations, Clinton and President George W. Bush. That didn't happen. That became the genesis of a lot of what China's building on with magnets. So I think it's fair to say that we are reacting now, but we also feel like at times that we trusted but did not verify and went beyond that. So speaking of that, we'll come to Joaquin. You have a very interesting vantage point. You're operating on both sides of the border. You're binational. And you're seeing the incredible potential that exists between our two nations. When you and I were discussing, one of the things that you talked about USMCA, which for everybody's benefit is US-Mexico-Canada agreement. This is the agreement that replaced NAFTA under President Trump's first administration. You shared with me that one of the criticism of USMCA, which is why the president is renegotiating right now, is because China has used USMCA as a backdoor for dumping goods. Is that a fair criticism? Do you mind elaborating that, Joaquin?
I love the way you said it. I work on both sides of the border. I have businesses on both sides. I have to put up with policies on both sides of the border. I have to suffer the Mexican government as well as the U.S. government, so it's not easy. But the way we look at it is that USMCA has been great, but it has been abused. And I'm going to put my Mexican hat on. And I do believe that that what we are seeing in the federal policy is a reaction of the abuse that Chinese companies have been doing in Mexico in order to reach the U.S. market. And we have seen it with U.S. companies doing business in Mexico. We have seen it with Mexican companies reaching the U.S. market. And you have an unbelievable amount of smuggling coming into Mexico from China. If you ask me right now what is the biggest, we love to compete. That's what we're here for. We love to compete. We love to compete in Mexico, in the States. But what we don't like is the unfair competition. And it's impossible to compete against products coming into Mexico without paying any tariffs, paying any taxes, paying any employment tax, paying any employees, just squeezing through Mexico to reach the U.S. market. I think that's wrong. I think that's what is jeopardizing the U.S. Businesses and the Mexico businesses competition. And we cannot compete.
And Joaquin, just to clarify, these are goods that are made in China, and my understanding is sometimes they're relabeled as made in Mexico.
That is correct.
Qualify for content requirements for USMCA. And I know my students here, we've been discussing USMCA. If you have 75% and above content made for North America, that qualifies for duty-free import into the United States. So you could have a Chinese good and if it's labeled US, made in Mexico, it could actually come into the country. It is coming to the country without paying any duty. So that is at the heart of this issue that you are talking about.
That is correct. I think that's the biggest challenge that we have to renegotiate the USMCA is how to stop the illegal imports from China into Mexico, into the States. There is a lot of illegal imports and into Canada as well. Right. So how can we stop that?
So USMCA was replaced NAFTA. It was NAFTA days. The content requirement was 62.5%. It got increased to 75%. When it was first passed, and by the way, it was supported by both parties. Again, it's important to recognize in this polarizing moment that on trade issues, as the Dean mentioned, there had been agreement. The Congress would actually act, they would actually get advice, they would actually ratify these agreements. So it was passed 6 years ago. It is supposed to go under review as we speak. So currently we are in a review period with Mexico. And if it's renewed, it's up till it goes till 2036, right? And if we don't review it successfully, then we have to go through a painful renewal every year, which involves a public comment period, which we'll talk a bit later what that means and how you all can be part of it. But a question for you, since you are looking at USMCA, besides the China issue, what are a couple of other improvements you would like to see in this agreement as the president renegotiates that?
Definitely. What was the spirit? The spirit of the USMCA from the very beginning, the spirit of NAFTA. It was to produce more in North America. And the spirit was to bring U.S. goods into Mexico, put them together and send them back. But the idea was to source the products from Mexico, from the States, but not from China or from Asia, from anywhere else. So what is the biggest opportunity that we have as USMCA for the three countries is to actually promote tier 2s and tier 3s to be developed in any of the three countries, but to develop these new suppliers in North America instead of sourcing those products from someplace else.
Right. By the way, some numbers are amazing. When I look at this number, they're jarring. Almost $2 trillion worth of trade in North America, in part made possible by these relatively free trade agreements. $2 trillion, that's 30% of GDP. So we're talking about this review period is so consequential to just the overall trade volume and the well-being of so many people. You are also running a business on both sides of the border, in construction, in logistics. As a CEO, as a business owner, how are you navigating this environment?
Well, you have to see the opportunities.
No, that's great that you're an optimist.
I mean, always an optimist, no? What are we doing? Personally, in my business, we have a development company. We're building 2 industrial parks. We're actually building a warehouse in Brownsville here with the mayor. And we have a lot of opportunities of companies from all over the world trying to open manufacturing in the States. So that is the positive part, no? We are working with a French company that is looking into a 250,000 square foot building to do automotive parts. We're working with a Japanese company that is looking into 300,000 square feet in McAllen to do a part of the assembly of the products on the US side. And we have in Brownsville a company that is actually doing a lot of work on the Mexican side that is going to start working on the twin plant, the initial concept that everybody was looking for with the USMCA, no? So yes, you see a lot of opportunities of companies from all over the world trying to do business. And where do they want to do business? That's very interesting. They want to do business in the States, for sure. But they want to do business in Texas. That's unreal. That's probably, Texas is the most attractive state in the union. And third, they want to be close to the border. So the mayor here and myself, we have seen a lot of RFIs, requests for information, requests for proposals coming into the valley. Mm-hmm. And it's just great. I mean, we make a joke. We have the 2 best salespeople in the world, Elon Musk because every time he sends a tweet about launching rockets out of the valley, everybody looks at us. And second, Donald Trump, because every time he's pushing businesses to do business in the US, they have to come and see us. So in a sense, I mean, there is a way of looking at things, the negative side or the positive side. And if you are in business, we have to look at how we can get on the right side of the story. Even if you don't like what is happening, there might be some opportunity.
You see an opportunity in the construction, just given the trade volume and just the continued growth. You're building major projects on both sides of the border. Your other side of the business is logistics, right? And that's where the tariffs have an impact. How is that going?
The Mexican textile companies are suffering, but everybody thinks that in the long run they're going to get a benefit. This is what we think, and maybe the mayor can help me out. We think that whatever happens with the tariffs, Mexico is going to get a better tariff than anyone else. So if you're within USMCA, we might end up getting a 5%, 10% tariff when the rest of the world might be at 18, 20%. So we are going to have a competitive advantage. If that happens, in my case, the textile companies should be doing a lot better. I just came from Mexico City just on Sunday, and the whole spirit is, yes, this is painful, but I think we're going to get into a better place once everything is done.
And just a couple of things that you shared with me earlier, that because of this discussion on USMCA, Mexico actually has also imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, which is somewhat unprecedented, and that has happened because of the push from the United States, which should also help us reduce this dumping of cheap goods into China that comes across the border, relabeled. Just one point I do want to ask you, and then we'll ask John, how's the salesperson doing for you in Brownsville? You had a great example for me, which illustrates the point of tariff policy when it comes to the wood and how the wood is transported. Do you want to share with the audience
this is
the conundrum with the wood and furniture?
That particular company is my client and is the mayor's client. It's kind of difficult to understand because normally what the spirit of USMCA, if you're shipping US products into Mexico, and then you're sending a finished product back, then you get credit for whatever you use as a US product you used. For example, if you are considering the cabinets, if 50% of the wood is sent into Mexico, when you send the finished product back, you should not be paying taxes on the US component of the product. What is kind of difficult right now is that the recent policy on wood manufacturing furniture, they are not allowing you to deduct the US wood. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for our client, for us. We think that's a mistake that the current administration is not solving. But I don't know what you think, Mayor, but I think that should be, you think it's going to stay that way? Or?
Right, and just to recap, what you said is pretty phenomenal. I found that to be pretty stunning that you have US wood from US market, gets exported to Mexico, comes back from Mexico in the form of finished good, call it furniture. And you would think that because the US, the wood, the content is from the US, it should come in duty free and does not have Section 302 tariffs, but it is tariffed as if the wood just also came from Mexico. And that's just one story of how some of these things are being rolled out without a lot of discussion or thought. And the custom border folks are often not even aware how to even manage this. So speaking of that, John, I'll come back to you, but with your hat on as a mayor right now as well, is that when you look at the USMCA, given that you obviously have a direct stake there, how is this review period impacting you when it comes to your businesses, small businesses, as well as opportunities for manufacturing in the region?
I think in the current environment, I think I'm like Joaquin here, and I think we have to look at it as, how can we best take advantage of this environment, right? And I think in Brownsville, we are building a 729-acre industrial park. We call it the Tech Manufacturing Hub, to attract companies that want to diversify their production network, right? So we have a lot of Mexican suppliers, manufacturers that are looking to hedge their tariff exposure. And they're looking at the valley, at the Rio Grande Valley, and they're looking at Brownsville. So I think as mayor, I'm trying to accelerate investment in infrastructure so that we can attract those middle-income, high-paying jobs that historically we were not getting. Historically, we were a pass-through port of entry. We want to add value in the supply chain in Brownsville. So I think there's a real opportunity there.
So if automakers in Detroit, which I know you were involved with, they obviously have a big stake in the USMCA review. If they want to reshore some manufacturing or parts of the supply chain manufacturing in the United States, in Brownsville, are you a possibility as a city?
Absolutely. I think we have the workforce. We have 1.5 million people within 60 miles on the U.S. side. Median age is 29 years old, right? And so I think the rest of the country, I've seen through my clients that have moved manufacturing from the U.S. to Mexico is a lot of it is because of lack of workforce. People that want to do these jobs in other parts of the country, they're being guided to other careers. So I think we are, really primed for that opportunity.
And you shared with me that you had bid for Tesla and Rivian, so you've gone through the motions of attracting automakers.
So we're on the radar to attracting an assembly plant. So as you said, we bid on the Tesla assembly plant here that was awarded to Austin, and also the Rivian plant in Georgia. So I think we're well positioned from the automotive supply chain to be able to supply the assembly plants in Texas, but also the ones in Mexico. So we're kind of the midpoint.
We talked about also the impact of immigration policy on your town. The state is a state of immigrants, and Brownsville especially. How are you dealing with that, and especially when it comes to attracting manufacturing, where you need people to do their jobs? So how is your town handling, and what's your perspective as a mayor and as a leader of all communities?
I think it's a very challenging time to be mayor of a border town. We have there's a considerable amount of people that do work in the United States and on the border that might cross on a tourist visa to work. They're not supposed to work on the U.S. side, but they do work. They do fulfill a function. They do work in restaurants as busboys, dishwashers. They're doing construction. Now, they should be doing it the right way, but that hadn't been enforced under Democrats or Republicans. That was a policy that just people didn't touch. Mm-hmm. Now the current administration is going out to construction sites, ripping people out. Our projects are paused. I see help wanted signs all over town. So it's a real challenge to continue this growth that we're experiencing. I wish there was a path forward for people that wanted to stay in the United States, that have contributed. There were good citizens that added value to our economy. As I was saying, I think the U.S. is not replacing itself, organically. We need immigration. We need people to come here that want a better life, that are good, that are good citizens, that are following the law. But we need to give them a pathway. I think there should be a penalty. They should. They did not do it the right way. But I think removing them from our country is the wrong approach.
So the reason we bring this up is that trade policy is not a silo. If the rationale for trade policy is to help reshore, and if we are saying create jobs, then we also want to see who are the people, who are the workers, what industries, what sectors, what regions. And that's why I think your story about Brownsville, and you shared with me that in your main street there are help wanted signs, that it's an important story that these are all connected. And I'm going to put you in the hot seat as my former colleague from the administration. Things got to a certain... Well, no, this is why you're here for a reason, Don. What would we do differently? What would you do differently? If you're going back and you saw with border crises under President Biden, which has led to, quite frankly, perhaps, if I may say, an overcorrection on that front. Any reflections on that?
There's a whole range of things that, we serve at the pleasure of the president. So we serve his agenda, and you enact his agenda. And the good thing for me is that I was friends with him, so I agreed generally with his agenda. But there are a lot of things, if you want to look at immigration in particular, there should have been more of the surge, if you will, and dealing with immigration first for folks that were coming across the border. I know that became then a talking point. At the same time, though, we probably spent too much energy on the Hill getting some big pieces of legislation done when we could have had an opportunity to get a comprehensive immigration bill passed. And I think you had folks on both sides of the aisle who were willing to do it, but you weren't going to be able to get a certain senator from West Virginia and a certain senator from Arizona to agree to some of the other pieces of legislation that we were trying to get done, unless we did. Well, let me put it this way: we should have started not just with the bipartisan infrastructure law, but we should have done comprehensive immigration reform at the same time.
And I must say, this was not part of the plan to put Don on the spot on this issue, but just for everyone's benefit, as a reminder, for the first 2 years of Joe Biden's presidency, the Senate was 50-50. And you look at, the Dean talked about the CHIPS and Science Act and some of the bipartisan legislation that actually went through in a 50-50 Senate. President Obama, by contrast, in his first term, had 63 senators. So if you want to talk about competition and immigration reform, that is an opportunity missed at that time. And now we see where we are because we're trying to solve problems, and we are in a very, very, unfortunately difficult situation. I have one last question. I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. If you were to have an audience with President Trump on this trade policy issue, just on this one, to keep it scoped, what's one ask you would make of him?
Not immigration, on trade policy.
Yes, yeah, that's why I said trade policy.
I would say go back to what the Dean started with. Look at the range of tools that you have in the toolbox and the way that you build relationships with our partners around the world. Remember that we're in a global trading system and that our partners can go directly to the PRC, they can go to other trading partners. And so you have to have a little bit of carrot along with the stick. You have to create an environment where they're willing to use, you talked a little bit about the leverage that the president is using on Mexico to get them to impose stronger, more protectionist, but tariff policies against the PRC. We were trying to do that on steel and aluminum. We made a lot of progress. That's where we should be. I'm not saying that having stronger tariffs, tariff policy is a bad thing. I'm saying you have to mitigate that by also offering opportunities to create more trade partnerships where you can get, yes, Europe to impose harsher penalties on China for dumping steel and aluminum into their market. So you have to look at all the opportunities to do this and also recognize that tariffs are an import tax. So you go back to where you started with small businesses. Right now, Goldman just came out with a study, I don't know, the last week or two. We're going to see about $600 billion worth of taxes, of the tariffs borne by the American people. 55% of the costs of the tariffs will be borne by the American consumers. About 22% will be borne by businesses. But I guarantee you that will be mainly by small businesses because they don't have the cash flow, they don't have the reserves, they don't have the ability to take that.
So what would be your ask of him?
I would say
carve out to small businesses or work with allies?
Yes, both. I would certainly say both.
You have two asks of the president.
I have two asks of the president. Work with our partners and allies, recognize that there are great markets like Africa fastest growing market in the world. Don't cut our company's legs out from under us. Let us get out to the market and sell our goods, because right now they're imposing reciprocal tariffs on us. And then also make sure that you're not killing the U.S. consumer, and more importantly, maybe the U.S. small business that is just hemorrhaging right now, because in order to compete with the big stores, the big companies, they have to eat those costs themselves.
Understood. Mayor, you're asking the president.
Yeah, for me, this is a golden opportunity to help Mexico address the rule of law of issues that they have, right? Is really, you're going to be able to incentivize them to really create a better environment for trade. Like Joaquin said, it's there's a lot of smuggling that's happening that's causing a lot of harm to the U.S. economy. But I think just from a personal story, I haven't taken my family to Mexico in 16 years, right? As a family, I go all the time because it's not a place that the environment there is a challenge, right? The security environment, right? I think this is their time to really push the needle on security with Mexico in the trade lens.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joaquin. You're asking.
I want to say that the mayor speaks Spanish better than me. But what I will tell Donald Trump is, whatever the rules are going to be, do it quick. I mean, we can adjust to whatever rules there are. I think we business people, we will always find a way to succeed. But we need the rules to be set. And the problem is the uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen the next week. If he wants to impose 100% tariffs, if it's made, if it makes sense on the commercial side, that's perfect. If it's only to have a stick against certain companies or countries, I think that's wrong. But whatever the rules are going to be, we need to have them set as soon as possible.
That's a fair ask. I think, as the dean said, and is that we have used under his administration, the tariff policy has been used as a political tool. So a lot of times, whether it's in case of Russia and Ukraine war, with India, buying Russian oil, they're used as a way to negotiate other priorities of the administration. And that's why it becomes harder, because sometimes they're not coming as an economic policy. It's coming as, how can I get something else done with this very critical tool? So I'm not sure if you'll get that ask delivered upon, but it's something that we hear from businesses all the time. We need clarity. We need stability. We'll find a way. And I've been an entrepreneur all my life. We are resourceful, but give us the stability of policy. Given just how much opportunity there is in the country, that we will find a way forward. So with that, I'm going to open it up for Q&A, exciting part of the discussion tonight. If you could just share your name, your affiliation. If you're with UT, tell us which school you are. If you're from outside the university, tell us what you do, please. Michael, my fellow professor from McCombs.
Good evening. Thank you all very much. My name is Michael Muth. I also teach here at McCombs. The current administration believes negotiating one-on-one with multiple countries is the best way to go about furthering America. So I guess my follow-up question is the WTO dead? Or is there a multilateral institution that can save or resuscitate the system to be able to encourage trade in the future?
Is WTO dead, Don?
Yes, it's been dead. It's been dead.
And by the way, please elaborate why it's been dead.
Because it hasn't been worked. It's cumbersome. It takes too long, and you have a country like China.
Can I push back? Can I push back on you that one? Thank you, Michael. And we didn't coordinate this question. I was reading about WTO last night in preparation for this. Both President Biden and President Trump actually delayed the appointment of judges on these appellate that actually do dispute resolution. Yes. So we dragged our feet under both parties, both administrations, to make WTO ineffective by not having a dispute mechanism system. That's the whole reason why WTO was created, going back to FDR days. So when you say it's been dead, well, let's be clear.
I'm not saying that we aren't
killed
to
it,
blame
right?
for it.
Well, you're part of the economic team with President Biden. So anyways, I had to...
I would, in answer to the second part of Michael's question, and former colleague of mine as well, thank you for your service. Career civil servant, really important. Hopefully you all are looking into civil service as a fantastic career path. There's the opportunity to create new multilateral systems. You had it coming out of the work that we were doing, coordinated to deal with Russia's extended full-on invasion of Ukraine. We garnered 37 partners around the world to implement export controls together. So you can do things like that. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, another part of commerce, worked on coordinating climate issues and dealing with issues like fisheries. So you can do multilateral agreements together. But I don't see the current administration all that interested in doing those types of agreements to get at what Michael was
Absolutely, but it is patchwork, and it's very much a reaction to a certain global conflict or an issue. I want to get your thoughts, if you have any thoughts on WTO, or if you thought from a U.S. message it was not an issue.
I'm a simple man. If you're going to come into my market, I'll set up the rules. So world trade is fine, but at the end, if I'm the owner of the land and I'm the owner of the country, I need to set up my rules for my land. So I think that at the end, one-on-one negotiation is going to be the rule of the land from now on.
So the challenge with that construct is we have 180 nations or 220 nations in the United Nations. We are in a globalized world. To wish that somehow we're going to go back and just be all not trading with each other, that's frankly not realistic. The idea of one-on-one bilateral is not scalable. And one of the best things about WTO, with our American hat on, we help set the rules for WTO. We put that global economic order in place. And when we let it die, under both presidents, we essentially have now lost the leverage to set this global economic order, if you will, in the United States image. And I think when you look at these deals, and right now we are having a deal with China, it's been back and forth. It took a couple of years last time around in the president's first administration to finalize the deal with China. It's a massive relationship. Imagine doing this with every single country one-on-one. So that's a challenge. We will call for another conversation another day, but thank you for the question, Michael. And also thank you for your service, Commerce Department, Civil Service Officer. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Michael Henderson, adjunct professor in the design school and also graduate of the McCourt School of Policy at Georgetown.
Oya Saxa.
Oya Saxa. For decades, the United States has been a stabilization economy as well as currency. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on, to juxtapose against other BRIC nations, right, and countries around the world, what are the short and long-term effects as we are no longer that stabilization currency and economy when you think about petroleum and other goods and services?
So BRIC, it comes up quite a bit. They had floated an idea of, alternative to US dollar. Don, do you have a view on this?
BRICS, for those that don't know, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, et cetera, et cetera. There's a group of unaligned countries. I think that it's becoming an issue for us, and it will increase in its challenge to us as we continue to sort of pull back from engaging with the rest of the world. I think it's a real problem for us and the power of the dollar as folks move to crypto. They move to, the dollar will be around for a long time still. But as they find other mechanisms to exchange currency, going around the SWIFT banking system, as you saw Russia do when we imposed sanctions. So I think it's a real problem for us, and I do think that we will no longer be seen as the most important power in the world.
But do you think there's a possibility that would happen in our lifetime?
Well, maybe not our lifetime, but I think in the lifetime of some of the folks in the room, I think it's a distinct possibility unless we find ways to re-engage.
Let me turn this ahead just to be prescriptive here, and John, I'll get you on this conversation. How do we prevent that from happening? Let's make sure the United States dollar remains the world's currency.
I think we need to, restore our credibility as a nation that is credible. We can predict what's going to happen in our country. When you have a current administration or the current president that's enacting emergency powers to enact tariffs unilaterally without the input of Congress, without the input of the trade community, I think it creates an environment that people don't want to participate in, right? So it's going to shift dollars to other or currencies into other areas of the world, right? So it's going to deter from investment and from I think a long-term growth for the United States.
So it's connected, So the policy, so the currency issue is connected to your credibility on the economic front and our trade relations. There were a couple of more hands here. I think you had a question, and then I'll come to you if you don't mind. Please go ahead.
James Galbraith. I'm a professor at the LBJ School, and I was the executive director of the Joint Economic Committee in the early 1980s. So I remember when deindustrialization actually began. It was before Mexico was to blame, it was before Japan was to blame, and it was long before China was to blame. It was a policy that we imposed on ourselves. But I wanted to ask a very specific question about the current situation. China has just imposed very strict export controls on a range of materials. One of them, gallium, is essential to semiconductor production. It is a byproduct, as I understand it, of the production of aluminum, in which China has a capacity, I checked it just now, 43 million metric tons to our 670,000 metric tons. Therefore, there is no way that we can obtain gallium in the quantities we need, except by buying it from China, so far as I'm aware. And I'm wondering, since it is such an essential material for every advanced electronic process, what kind of leverage do we actually have other than Scott was saying, going to Jakarta and essentially giving the Chinese what they asked for in return for their relaxing those concerns?
Thank you, Professor, for the question, and thanks for being here tonight. I'm so glad you joined us. Do we have a leverage on rare earths?
That is a fantastic question, and it's actually really fun, having been the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, to talk about an area that most people had, up until a few years ago, had never paid attention to. So one of the tools that we have, leverage, is this small agency within Commerce called the Bureau of Industry and Security, which manages our export controls. We have, because of what our industry does, our products, our components, our know-how is in almost every industry around the world. We are the grand proliferator. We track, through the International Trade Administration and the Bureau of Industry and Security, we track where every product, every component, everything that flows out of this country, including intellectual property, we know where it's going because our companies have to fill it. And I know, as a serial entrepreneur, and with my fellow business people here, you know how painful it is. You have to fill out the forms explaining where everything is going, but we track it all. So we know which companies in China are using our technology. And so we do have the ability to impose reciprocal export controls, sort of like the nuclear option, what we would affectionately call it internally, quietly, where we could essentially block a country from getting certain types of technology. That's what we imposed on Russia. And there's a black market. It's hard to control where.
But Don, the issue is this, going back to the professor's question, when President announced Liberation Day tariffs, China literally 4 days after came up with this list of gallium being exported. Like, they were ready to go. They were raring to go.
We're both.
And we didn't have a response to it. And now they came back and extended the list, which is what led to the. So the
we were.
Issue is,
I will
really
tell you, both sides, meaning the PRC and the U.S., understand very well where you have leverage. We were developing the same sorts of lists, understanding where we had the ability to impose, harsh penalties or impose export controls that would have the most impact. We do that for a lot of our competitors in the world and especially adversaries. And so I don't know what happened, and maybe they decided that they were going to just let those play out and not impose.
So the reality is, and this is going to be it's a plug for our next forum. We're going to spend an entire evening talking about rare earth minerals. It is a critical topic for our national security. I would say for economic security, for our daily lives, because they're powered by these devices that are powered by these magnets and by these rare earth minerals. We are so behind China on this, like in virtually every single rare earth or critical earth that we need. And so, yes, these are back and forth, but until we figure out a broader story about investing in rare earths, there is an industrial policy the president has launched pretty aggressively, which is about DoD making investment in MP materials, Apple investing in MP materials. We also talk about is there an opportunity for innovation in this space? So we'll discuss that in a few weeks. But to your point, export controls is a lever.
And it has diminishing power over time. Absolutely. So it's not perfect right now.
Absolutely. Pranjal, yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Pranjal. I'm an MBA student here at McCombs. My question was on India-US relationships. That was something which came up during the latter part of the session. In light of the tariffs which have been imposed on India, how do you see the relationship between the two countries in terms of the short-term effects and the long-term effects? Now, the relation had seen steady strides since the NSG days. How is it right now? How do you see it going in the future?
Don, it's a federal subject, so I have to address to you.
It's really problematic, I think. The two largest democracies in the world, and we can't seem to figure out how to work together. And longstanding history, and I won't go into when the U.S. sort of turned its back on India and India turned its back on the U.S., but we had been coming closer together in recent years. And in fact, I think there was some belief that there was going to be this turn from China and that India was going to be the big new trading partner that would help us, especially in critical emerging technologies. I think that relationship is in real trouble right now. I think that President Trump doesn't trust Mr. Modi, and Mr. Modi doesn't trust President Trump. And I mean, India is reliant right now on Russia for oil, and it has a massive population, and it's trying to grow its economy to bring the population up to middle income status, basically. So they have to take Indians have to take steps to help increase their economic growth that are contrary to what I think President Trump believes. So I don't see the two countries, our relationships getting better given the direction of the current administration.
So Joaquin, I know you have a binational perspective, and from afar, when you look at what's happening with the United States and India, obviously two major powers and where we are, any perspective on this? Was it a surprise for you to see the breakdown?
I don't think I can top what he said. It's not my subject of choice. I wouldn't be able to tell you something about it. I'm sorry, but
it's okay. All good. I don't mean to. John, go ahead.
The tariff on India right now is 50%. 50%.
So
it's a big number.
You know, I joined the State Department 2 weeks before Russia attacked Ukraine. And at the time, we had a very significant policy tool set, which was that we were punishing folks who were dealing with Russia, because that was the tool set. And there was quite an effective, I think, sanction regime on Russia as well. And one of the things that President Trump has picked up on, and it's hard to argue against that, is that India has continued to buy cheap Russian oil, which in fact is what you get ruble from, and that's how they're able to conduct this brutal, horrible war. And he's not able to get a win on this. And you saw just over the last 24 hours, the back and forth with President Zelensky, what happened in that Oval Office meeting that many of you saw that we've never seen before. He wants this to be over. And I think there is a genuine feeling that allies who have not been helpful in this regard, there needs to be a conversation on that. So I would go back to what we were saying earlier. These tariffs often have been used not just in economic policy, they've been used as a tool to negotiate. And if there is an end to that, and I hope that war comes to an end without Ukraine compromising its sovereignty, then there's a path forward. Because the reality is India is an emerging power. And absolutely, we talk about U.S. competitiveness when it comes to countering China. India has a major role to play in my own engagements there. We were pushing for a lot of supply chain diversity there. So it's really sad to see where things are. But I see the point on behalf of President Trump, given the broader context of Ukraine and Russia. All right, other questions. But it's amazing how many different topics we are addressing. We'll go for you, and then we'll go to you. Please go ahead. If you can share your name, please.
Sergio Olivas. I'm a PhD student in the Econ department. I'm also a native of El Paso, so these topics are,
Could you speak up, please?
All right. My question is kind of on workforce development. So at the beginning, we talked about, case studies of small countries in which, they used a portfolio of tools, to really lean into certain comparative advantages. The U.S. is obviously a very big country with many economic centers, so tech in some areas, finance in other, and energy. I would like to hear a little bit more about the role that maybe local and state governments can have in leadership in terms of building out our regions as opposed to just relying on Washington.
Great question. Thank you. Workforce question. I'll go to the mayor here, since we're talking about local communities, developing talent, workforce.
I believe the current manufacturing employment in the United States is around 8%, and pre-NAFTA was around 30%. So our share of our population that's doing manufacturing is relatively much smaller, right? So I think with all this opportunity, it's incumbent on our trade schools, our community college, our university systems to all work together to develop the pipelines of developing the talent that we have and upskilling, because we don't have the workforce right now.
Is there an initiative you've launched as a mayor that has gone?
So I can tell you, for example, SpaceX, right? They require orbital welders, which is it's a rare, program to have in the United States. We worked with our community college to develop that in-house, and they develop welders for SpaceX.
Wow.
So it's a example of innovating with our industry, right? And I think that's what we're going to have to do. We have to be agile, because this technology that's coming, that's going to be iterative, right? With AI, with everything that's coming, we can't rely on the previous ecosystem for manufacturing in the United States. We have to really accelerate how we approach workforce.
And you've shown that it's doable.
Absolutely.
Right? And that should give everyone confidence, right? That when you see the need, we have the ability to train people for new jobs. Thank you. Appreciate that. There was a hand right there. Yes, please.
Hi, this is a question for Joaquin. Travis Bryan, I'm with the LBJ School of Policy. Considering we started tonight talking about China's kind of master strokes in industrial policy, and thinking about the USMCA and what you mentioned about building more security in Mexico and hopefully Central America, what other forms of economic cooperation and kind of 10, 20-year vision of economic planning and integration might we prioritize in terms of Mexico bilateral cooperation?
Mexico is kind of in a difficult spot right now. because at the beginning of the USMCA, at the beginning of NAFTA, Mexico set up several different organizations that oversaw everything regarding commerce with the states. And the last administration basically got rid of all of them. And we just had a massive judicial reform that is not positive for the country. We are going back 30 years. It's as bad as that. But we're going to have to live with this environment. We have no choice. No? I think that the positive side is that the current president, she understands that the last thing she can do is get into commercial or trade war with the US. 80% of all Mexican manufactured goods come to the States. So we are highly dependent on the USMCA and NAFTA. So what we see into the future, we see the Mexican president doing whatever she needs to do in order to keep that same trade with the US in a safe mode. No?
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Sorry, I missed you. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ria Sengupta. I'm a freshman in international relations and plan to honor student at UT. And my question hinges off the fact that all three of you guys are so familiar with small businesses. Small businesses took such a hard hit during COVID-19, and they've been struggling to get back to that same magnitude ever since. Do you think that these tariffs, while keeping these businesses while they are already down, will allow them to ever get back to the same scale and magnitude that they were before the pandemic?
We'll go to the mayor first, since you have a main street.
I think it's a real challenge. I mean, I'm a small business owner. I guess I have about 150 employees, and I'm investing in technology to being more efficient with the manpower I have, the infrastructure I have. I'm making sure I'm sourcing from different suppliers to get the best to drive the best cost for my business, right? So I think businesses have to do the same thing. They have to really analyze their operations, be really lean, be efficient, and I think we'll be okay. But it's I think it's like putting gasoline on the fire with the tariffs, right? It's just not. I don't see how how this is good for anyone on the small business level.
Do you still have optimism on this, Joaquin?
Well, I'm a small business owner myself, and the first thing I did, I got a loan from the SBA. A couple of things that work. First, you need to get engaged. Go to your chamber of commerce, get close to the city, to the economic development corporations, talk to the state, the local universities. They all have a small business program. I went myself my wife is here, about 16 years ago, we were able to secure an SBA loan for a pretty big building. And a couple of years after that, we got another loan for another SBA loan for another building, and another one after that. So the message is, first, wake up an hour earlier, go to sleep at 11 o'clock at night, work on Saturdays and Sundays. And what I tell all the younger generation, don't waste your time. I mean, we are flooded with so many things that distract us from actually doing something productive, from Netflix, from TikTok. And guys, it's impossible. If you get focused and you get close to your city, state, government official, student organizations, you'll find a way.
If I may, I wouldn't blame Netflix for tariffs. I have a perspective here, as I had the privilege to help run the SBA. 97% of importers in this country are small businesses. 97%. 2/3 of small businesses export. And you're absolutely correct. We are not talking enough about small businesses' impact. The stories that I'm hearing, and I talk to folks all the time because I still get people reach out to me, and I wish I could give them some support and assistance. But speaking of SPA, since we're talking about policy, under DOGE, one of the first agencies that was impacted was SPA. 43% of SPA's workforce was summarily dismissed without any analysis. When we're talking about SBDCs on campuses, they're long gone, Joaquin. They're not around. So even if I get up 3 hours earlier, I can't find a resource to talk to anybody. And one of the things that we have suggested, and I have been talking about this on media to the administration, is, you know what, see if in some sector there could be a carve out. Because if a big company can go and have a conversation with the president in the Oval Office and get a carve out, why can't they be carved out for small farmers? You know, why can't they carve out for critical supply chain or auto manufacturers who have to choose between paying a tariff duty or laying off their workers? These are stories time and again. And one of the concerns I think we have as just an academic and is that impact on jobs because you're seeing job cuts. We saw 500,000 jobs in part because of the layoffs on the small end. That doesn't make a lot of news. So it's a real challenge. I'm hoping there'll be a reception to it. The good news is there's a very strong advocacy ecosystem around small businesses. They're talking to the administration, and we hope they'll be receptive. Don, do you want to add something here?
I'll just say amen to that. And yes, you see, we had the same thing happen at the Commerce Department. Part of the International Trade Administration that Michael actually was part of is the Foreign Commercial Service. So at the State Department, you have your Foreign Service. These are the diplomats who go and negotiate and deal with, things that are blowing up, figuratively and literally. The Foreign Commercial Service is our advocates in other countries all around the globe, in every capital, basically. The folks who go in and deal with the negotiations with another country or deal with issues that crop up in another country that your business has to deal with. So they're employed to help small business people, especially, get out to the rest of the world, sell their products, work with partners. And we've eliminated a huge number of our foreign commercial staff, which means that our businesses no longer have visibility into what's actually happening in markets. So you have to spend your money, go over to another country, and then you don't have a partner with you to come into meetings or introduce you to the right people. So you're having to navigate that all by yourself. It's okay for a larger business, the Bechtels, Boeings, et cetera, of the world. Maybe I shouldn't use Boeing, but Bechtels of the world. But if you're a small business person, you aren't going to know how to navigate getting into any other market in the world, and maybe you don't even speak the language there.
Right. I have a question for you, and we'll probably wrap up after this unless there's any final questions. Given trade volatility, given we just talked about cuts in government, what would you say to our students here who want to pursue a career in either service or want to be involved in global business, international business? What advice you have for them as they might be feeling this uncertainty, given some of the things that we talked about, or what they see in the news with DOGE cuts? So, piece of advice for them. Again, I want you to inspire them, Don, with pursuing an opportunity here. So let's bring up the optimism.
This is the best time. You're buying low. You're getting. I mean, seriously, I am not joking. Get in now, and it's all up from here. I'm kidding a little bit, but
that's all right. You could say that.
No, but seriously, it is the two things. My decision to be a business person is like the thing that it kills me, but it makes me alive every single day. That I get to try an idea, see if it works. It's your own. And especially if you're trying in the global marketplace, it's like there are billions of people out there, and they have their ideas, and you're trying to jostle your idea up to the top. Public service is the single greatest thing I've ever done, and I get emotional about this. For me to be able to deliver to the people that I see every single day, I will never forget the day that I got this job offer, and I'll be quick about it. I was working at the Treasury Department, was at the time in the Obama administration. I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Small Business, Community Development, and Housing Policy. I was the Main Street guy at a department that does macro. And I started working with some folks over at the White House around an idea to create a council of business people who could help guide the president. And so one day I get this call. I'm supposed to be going to my hometown of Cleveland with then Secretary Geithner to support him on small business issues. The president's having a big event there. I get this call the day before. They say, Mr. Graves, and it says unknown number, so I don't know who it is. I say, yes. They said, yes, this is so-and-so from the White House. We're going to have to ask you to cancel your flight to Cleveland. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm being fired. And he said, no, the president would like you to fly with him on the plane. So next day, fast forward, I've been up most of the night. I get there really, really early, go to the gate in front of the White House, say, I'm fine with the president. Thank you, sir. Well, who are you? And, so they say, you're not in the system. You're going to have to call your contact. I'm like, my contact? There was an unknown number. So I call everyone that I know. Eventually, they tell me, go around, wait on the other side of the White House, and someone will get you. So I'm waiting on the other side of the White House at another Secret Service gate, and all of a sudden the gates open, and out comes a motorcade. It's all the motorcycles and the flashing lights, and a van stops, and the door opens up, and they say, Don, get in. So I jump in this van, and we take off for Andrews. And it's members of the cabinet and senior White House folks, and I'm like, what is going on? We get to Andrews and pull up to the plane, and there it is, beautiful. Everyone goes up onto the plane, and I follow, say who I am. They say, yeah, come on up. I figure I'm in the back of the plane, so I start walking all the way to the back, because I don't know, I've never been on this plane before. And someone comes up to me, it was the chief steward, he says, Mr. Graves, no, sir, you're up here. And he takes me back up to this cabin, small cabin, right past the president's cabin. And there's 4 chairs, one's little cards on each of the chairs. One says Miss Jarrett for Valerie Jarrett. One says Mr. Daley for Bill Daley, who was the White House chief of staff. The third one was for, I can't even remember. It was all sort of blurry at that point. One says Mr. Graves. And so I sit down in my chair and I pull out some papers to look like I know what I'm doing. And I'm reading the same line over and over and over again. Fast forward, staff comes on board, we start taking off, and it's Valerie Jarrett and Bill Daley, and they, hey Don, how are you? Good, glad you're here with us. And they go back to doing their BlackBerries, because we had BlackBerries at that point. And we take off. And I'm just reading the same sentence over and over again. And what am I doing here? And I don't know if you've ever had that experience of the hair on the back of your neck standing up because you know someone is behind you. And I swear it was like a minute after we took off, and I turn, and there he is. It's the president. And he says, Valerie, yeah, and the swagger.
You're doing pretty well, actually. I like that.
Valerie. And I don't even remember what he said, because it's the president of the United States, and I'm here reading the same sentence, and I don't know what it's saying. And she said, they talk, and then she says, and Mr. President, you remember that Don is here flying with us to Cleveland. And so I stand up, and my papers go flying, literally. I don't know what they said anyway, so it doesn't matter. So I gather my papers, and I turn and say, Mr. President, so good to thank you for having me. He said, Don, thank you for being with us. And I want to thank you for agreeing to run my jobs council. He gave me this job on Air Force One, going to my hometown. And so we talk a little bit, and he walks back to talk to other folks on the plane, and he turns around and he says, and Don, and I'll censor it a little bit, don't F it up. And then he walks away. Of course, sir, of course. Everybody leaves, and I'm there sort of taking this in. And anyone who's flown into Cleveland from the east side of Cleveland knows that the track that you fly into Cleveland, you fly right over the east side, over downtown, and I look out the window, and I kid you not, I'm looking at my neighborhood, the neighborhood I grew up in, And I had been like floating. I was like, yeah, I just got this greatest job. And then I realized that's the poorest neighborhood in not just the city of Cleveland, it's the poorest neighborhood in the entire state of Ohio, one of the poorest neighborhoods in all of the country. And there are little kids who may be looking up and maybe they know what plane this is, but they have no idea that there's anyone on that plane who came from where they came from. So I give back because I want the folks that didn't make it out of that neighborhood to have the same opportunities that I had to become a deputy secretary of commerce and do great things. We need to create those opportunities for millions and millions of people across this country who don't know that they have a potential. They have great ideas, they have hopes and they have dreams, but they don't have the opportunity to live lives of dignity the way that many of us do. So hopefully you will do that. And I'm sorry for getting emotional.
John, try topping that.
That's hard to top.
Possible.
I think this is the best time ever to get involved. Whether it's international trade or public service, you can have an impact. We need people of high integrity, people that have good critical thinking skills. You know, I ran for office to make a difference in my community. I saw a history of corruption, lack of opportunity for our people. We were the poorest city in the United States for a long time. You know, my dad had 11 brothers and sisters. I'm the last cousin. I have like 50 first cousins. I'm the last person there in Brownsville because everyone left for opportunity, right? And right now, we are the fastest growing city for job growth in the state of Texas. And we are the #1 city in the United States for income growth for low-income families. Wow. We are breaking the cycle of poverty in our community, right? And, you know, and I don't want to take credit for it, but I think it takes good leadership to steward progress, to make sure that you're really moving the needle for your community. And I think we desperately need good people in office.
Thank you, Joaquin.
I can do better if I do it in Spanish.
Go for it.
No, what I would say is have fun. I mean, the risk, the emotions, the waking up early. My wife has to put up with me on. One time we were driving back from a business meeting on Sunday afternoon, and I was working on myself, and she said, "Do you think you already had enough for the week?" But it's fun. Just have fun. If you go into any small business or whatever you decide to do, just go at it. I mean, it's not going to be easy. Most of the time, you're going to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, sweating, not knowing how to make payroll that Friday, but it's fun. And the competitiveness of the U.S. is second to none. I mean, I was born in Mexico City. I came to school to UT. I'm a UT graduate. And when I was coming out, Mexico has just signed the General Agreement of Tariffs and Trades. So I ended up opening business along the border. And I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be luckier. I couldn't be more blessed. But it's just, if you ask me what is the, why? I mean, I think I've done all right, but I never let go. I mean, it was the competitive spirit going from Monday, 6 o'clock in the morning to Sunday, 10 o'clock at night. And it's every day, and it's a lot of fun. Just have fun.
And stay away from Netflix, you said.
Stay away.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stay away from TikTok. I think it's the worst.
So as I wrap up, I have to say your story. The last time that Don and I spent time, quality time, while you were sharing this, I was reminded of that, was on Air Force 2, actually. It was my first time on Air Force 2 with the Vice President Kamala Harris. And we had gone to Detroit on the VP's economic tour. This is before she became the Democratic nominee. And now I know why you were not that impressed by Air Force 2, because you clearly had better experiences. But it's wonderful to have you all here. Thank you for sharing your stories and this wisdom. And this is a complex topic, but as we talked about, it is, and you heard this, it's about people. It's about their livelihoods. It's about the country's future. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will continue to be a participant in these forums. I want to do a couple of quick plugs. First, I want to thank our team. This is a brand new effort. It's a new startup, and there's some great people who make this all happen. So Jennifer, there you are. If you could give a warm applause to Jennifer. Mary, where is Mary? Is Mary? There is Mary. If you could stand up, please. Everybody can see you. And we don't have Shantae here, and she's been absolutely phenomenal in helping us do this. Second, our next forum is on rare earth minerals. We're going to pick up the discussion where we left off today. You're most welcome to join again if you like, and that's on November 17th. Again, thank you for being here tonight, and mingle for a few minutes before we all head out. Thank you.